say wave, wave, so I know you're there. Yes, lovely. Good, yes. Hello. Marcus, we're all here. We're coming in. Did you all miss me last week? I missed you. I was in sunny walking in the woods.
Enjoyed it.
I did enjoy it. It might have been possible to log in, but although I did miss you, I didn't miss you so much that I decided to log in anyway. I decided to just carry on having my holiday. Here it all went well. Some of you were there, maybe some of you weren't. Thank you for all coming today. We're really excited. We have Hugh with us today, Hugh Dunford-Wood, who is in the top left of my screen. There we are. Hello, Hugh. Going to talk to us about his work and his life and all things that he's interested in as they occur to him at the moment of him speaking. And we'll look forward to that. I don't really have any announcements to make today. I'm going to remind you at the end of the session as well, we've got our next Zoom room is in a fortnight's time, Friday the 28th, and we will be talking to Roger Davis, who is the, I think the UK and the world land speed record holder for penny farthing riding, and you don't get many of those to the pound, I know. So we'll look forward to that. He's actually an amazing bloke, and he's doing this this marvelous mix of, as we've seen in some of our previous presenters' work, the mix of modern technology mixing with you know, ancient traditional technology. So he's made all sorts of modern inventions, penny farthing, which is alive and well in the UK. So there we are. Anyway, for a fortnight. For now, we've got a couple of people still in the waiting room there, Ben.
On it.
Stop rabbiting on, and I'm going to introduce you to Hugh and let Hugh speak. I'm recording the session, so as you all know, I'm going to put Hugh on speaker view. For me, I suggest you all do the same. Hugh, it's all on you. Welcome to the Zoom room.
Hello. Well, I'm very flattered to be asked to talk to you all. I have a reputation as one of the only hand printing wallpaper designers in the world. I'm the only one who teaches it as well, which is interesting. And I, twice a year, I take a class of about 10 people, and people come from all over the world. I mean, usually they come from the British Isles, but we've had them as far away as Australia, the States, and Hong Kong, and places like that, learning how to make wallpaper, which is a very, very simple thing. I was actually not trained as a designer at all. I went to the Ruskin School of Drawing, which is now called the Ruskin School of Art at Oxford University. And I graduated from there in 1971. When I was at university, nobody at that time, nobody had any real thoughts about what sort of work they might do when they left. It was all about the training. These days, artists are actually trained to be professionals. I wasn't trained to be a professional. I don't know if it was meant to be a gentleman's profession. I certainly didn't have any gentleman's income, so I had to make my way. However, it was very useful in that I was taught to draw and to paint, and the first year we spent from 9 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, that some of you might know. We spent time in the first year just drawing headless and armless Greek busts and broken casts of Greek figures. We were also allowed to paint the still life, and that's what we did for a whole year. It certainly got me drawing. It got me out into Oxford because it was incredibly boring. The second year, we got on to painting the nude and still doing still lives. And the third year, we got on to doing portraits. So when I came out, I was able to paint a decent portrait, and more or less anybody can learn that, I think. And I went there because it was the one subject that I was most interested in at school, most people went on to university or went into the services of some sort or another, whether it was medical or military. But I decided to go down there, and it was really being inspired by, at the age of 14, reading a biography of Modigliani, the French painter who died of excesses, really, in about 1919. And he was an Italian who lived in Paris. And I just thought this sounded a wonderful romantic life. And I thought, crikey, if you're going to live once, you might as well live an exciting life. So that's what I thought I was going to do. Well, I came out of the Ruskin, and suddenly all my peers were taken away from me, because I was, I had no particular base. My parents were in the army. Well, my dad was in the army, my mother was an army wife. And so we'd spent most of my childhood traveling around the world, and I really didn't have anywhere to call home particularly. So I stayed in Oxfordshire for a while, and then I made my way to London, where many of my colleagues from the Ruskin School of Drawing were living, and somehow scratching a living. I had about 2 weeks' work in Paper Chase when it was first opened, and I remember being called into the owner's office, and I thought, oh God, I'm going to get the sack or something. And she offered me a managership, and I fled, and I've never had a day's work since. I've somehow managed to make a living, because I think if you can draw and paint, there are always things coming up. I've just been asked to do a logo for a new book publisher, and it's of a thing, I don't even know how to pronounce it. It's a XERUS, which is a Cerus. It's a sort of African land squirrel. And anyway, so I've just been asked to do that overnight. And it's the sort of thing that suddenly lands on my desk. I have to do that sort of thing. However, I'm here really to talk about wallpaper, because that's how Chris got hold of me. And I was very lucky when I was living in London, that after doing a drawing session with a couple of friends, we went for a meal in a little Greek restaurant in Camden Town called Medites, and there was no room there. And so we sat at the end of a table with these very old ladies in their middle and late 60s. I mean, this is for a student, they were very old ladies. And we got rather merry together, and we didn't talk about anything relevant, although we'd been drawing a model, the three of us. And at the end of the meal, the lady that I was sitting next to said, come on, let's all go back to my studio. And my ears pricked up, and I thought, God, who's this? And we went back to Peggy's studio, and she was one of my two great mentors in my youth. And I believe very much in mentorship. I think it's a really important role to play. I don't know if I could claim to be mentors of others, but I think we should all look out for younger people to sponsor in a sort of more an emotional way, I think. But I'll talk about this in more depth later. Peggy was like a fairy godmother. She clasped me to her breast later that evening, after having a few whiskey macks, which was her wont, and she said, "You've been sent by Angus, my boy." And I said, No, I don't think I have. We met in this Greek restaurant. No, 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 you've been sent by Angus. Now, I didn't understand the meaning of this until really months later, when I learned a little bit more about her life. And she was born on a railway station in Chile, where her father worked for Robert Louis Stevenson's family company, making railways all over South America. And when she was born as Peggy Angus. When she was of a certain age, she got married to one Jim Richards, who was the editor of the Architectural Review, and she had 2 children. She was married just long enough for that, and then he ran, because she was a very, very dominating, difficult woman to be related to. Luckily, I was her boy, she called me. I was her apprentice, and so I didn't have that close a relationship, that she dominated me. I could get out of it at the end of the day. Anyway, Peggy had 2 children, Victoria, who lived as far away as possible in the Outer Hebrides, in Shetland, where she's married to the chief architect of the council there, and a boy who she called Angus. Angus Richards was training to be a farmer at Cirencester, but he was epileptic, and he had a fit and died. He choked himself and died. And Peggy was very distraught about this. Then she was teaching in the North London Collegiate College, and she took a year off to go and teach modern pottery techniques to the Balinese. There's relevance in this story, hang on. And anyway, she went out there, and her grant gave her enough money to travel, but not to live. So she traveled as slowly as possible. And at one point she stayed with someone she'd been introduced to by a third party, a woman called Teja in Pakistan. And she arrived days late. Peggy was not a very good timekeeper, and this woman said, "Look, you'll have to stay here because I've got to go into the country to meet someone." And she said, "Oh, well, can't I come? I think this would be interesting." No, it's a very long journey. It's very hot and sweaty there, and it's not a good climate, and you just have to sit outside while this is going on. I got to see my soothsayer. So she said, "Oh, this will be interesting. Can I come? I really like to come." So she sat in the back of the truck, and off they went, and sat on the veranda when all this gobbledygook was going on inside between Teja and the soothsayer, when suddenly Teja came outside and she said, "Mrs. Richards, does the name Angus mean anything to you?" "Why, yes, that's my son." "Oh, well, you better come on in. He's on the blower." And he said, "Look, I'm terribly sorry to have gone and died on you, but I'm very happy where I am, and I'm going to look after you. I arranged this sabbatical for you, and I'm going to arrange for young men to look after you, young men of my age, to look after you for the rest of your life." And I was the second. Now, when she told me this, the hairs on the back of my head went, and the first one was an architectural student who managed to build a lot of platforms in her studio so her 7 grandchildren could sleep there with their parents. And the second one was me, who got her wallpaper business going. She had, as I said, she was a teacher. She used to do little potato cuts with her school children when they were quite young. And potato cuts are literally, as they suggest, you cut a pattern in the potato, and with poster paint of some sort, you print on paper. The potato doesn't last, obviously. It lasts, an hour or 2, and then it begins falling to bits. But you can get enough to make a lampshade or a scarf or something like that. Anyway, it's a very good way of kids learning to make repeat patterns. And because her husband, Jim, was editor of the Architectural Review, she knew a lot of architects. One of them came along and said, these designs that you're doing with the children are quite remarkable. They're very fresh, they're very simple and uncomplicated, and I think they'd make good tiles. And before long, she was working for a company called, part-time, because she was also teaching, called Carter's Tiles, where she made tiles for the Festival of Britain, for Heathrow Airport when it was first built, and for all sorts of public buildings such as schools and hospitals. And she won various prizes for this. Now, there was another architect who came along and saw these tiles and said, look, if you can print on clay, put these things on clay, you can print on paper. Why don't you make some wallpaper for me? So indeed, she made wallpaper, but all her wallpapers were very tile-based. So they were, the designs were about the size of tiles. And when I was printing for her, because I became her apprentice, being a penniless student who wasn't getting many portraits at that time, it was very slow to print. You had to print one, print another, print another, print another, and then you went on to the next row, sometimes 5 in a row. And secretly, I took one of her blocks home with a large piece of lino, and I made 5 in a row. So I could print one, making a whole row, and I was printing these, and she thought I was cheating because I was doing them so fast, but she could see that there was an advantage in this. And then I started making my own designs, which were much bigger. And, you know, with the cockiness of youth, I was almost beating her at it. Anyway, I lasted with her for 18 months or so. And then I was lucky and got married. And we went down to live in Oxford, where I started decorating the house that we were living in with my own wallpapers, making bigger designs. And it's a very, very simple process. You get a piece of lining paper, you have all you need is one tool. This is a V-shaped gouge. I don't know if you can see it. Where are we? It's a V-shaped gouge. There, you can just about see against my finger. And that is really all you need. And this is a design. Can you see this one vaguely? So these are this is a block. This does half the side of a roll of wallpaper, and it's called a half drop repeat. So I print this one there, and next to it, I print the next one down here, and the next one will be at the bottom. And so they don't join side by side like that, but they join as a brick might be joined to its partner brick in a wall, and it makes for a much bigger design, because I'm not terribly interested in very small patterns. I like generosity of designs, and I have there's another block here which covers the whole sheet of wallpaper. It's that big. And this is based on, they're usually based on plants. The last one was amaranth. This one is based on magnolia. And I do quite a lot of drawing outside. I'm lucky to live with a foot in the country. For many years, I lived in Lyme Regis, but recently we moved to Bridport in Dorset, and we have a garden that leads up to a wood behind, and I do a lot of painting up there. The whole thing of wallpaper is an interesting one, because for years it was terribly unfashionable. When I was living in London and working with Peggy, she had contacts there. But when I moved to Oxford, not many people were interested in wallpaper in the 1970s. It was a time of grey walls and white skirting and minimal design after the excesses of the 1960s. And that really lasted until the 1990s. At that time, I was living in Oxford. No, I wasn't. I was living in Oxfordshire, out in the country. And we decided to move to Dorset. And we sold our house. And in selling the house, people came round. And for the first time, for years and years, instead of strangers coming in and almost shading their eyes from the excess of pattern on the wall, they said, "Where did you get this wallpaper?" And I said, "Oh, well, I made it, doesn't everybody?" Because you couldn't get decent wallpapers in those days. And they said, "You made it? What did you make it from?" So I showed them the blocks and they said, "Oh gosh, we'd love to buy these blocks." And you don't sell blocks because that's part of your arsenal, your equipment. And but when I moved to Lyme Regis, I realized that wallpapers were back in fashion. And I decided to set up a studio, and I went to a big show in London and showed my wallpapers, and people started buying them. It takes a long time for people to buy wallpaper. They see your design, they say, "Oh, I want that." And then you say, "Okay, how many rolls?" And they say, "Well, hang on a minute. We might have to replaster the walls. We've certainly got to do some rewiring. While we're at it, we've got to, you know," and it goes on and on and on. And then maybe 18 months later, you'll get a job. It's not going to keep the wolf totally from the door. He still paws at the door, because I'm not very good at promoting myself. I don't want to do just wallpaper, because the joy in making wallpaper is doing the designs, making the designs and working them out, and so they match, and so they join and they repeat. Printing them is quite sort of factory-like work, and I think those of you who saw that short video that Chris put out before this event will see that the printing is quite repetitive. Initially, I was taught to use a little roller, but now I do it by foot, because when I was in Lyme Regis, we got a job making some curtains, it turned out. But anyway, a load of linen we had to print for a National Trust home called Doddington Manor up in Leicestershire, just outside Leicester actually. And I made the design for them, and I thought they were going to get these reproduced somewhere. And they said, "Oh, no, 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 we'd love that. We'll have 145 meters. And I thought, for goodness sake, how the hell am I going to do this? So I rang up the technician at the Royal College, and he said, you need to get Procyon inks, and the best thing to mordant your material is your own pee. Well, the idea of having 145 meters of linen dripping with pee in my studio was enough to make me almost turn down the commission. But I found out it was for 4-poster beds and for curtains. So I could cut all this material into 2.2 meter lengths. And I printed it with one of my assistants. I also have slaves. Because the material, a wallpaper, is quite narrow. Let me get a roll of wallpaper. Here's a roll of wallpaper. So, oh, just wait, is that a better colour? This one, oh gosh, sorry, my clock. This is some wallpaper. It's 56 centimeters wide. A roll, a bolt of cloth is 54 inches wide. So it's massively wider. This fits on a printing table in my studio, which is behind me. I had to get two printing tables together to put this cloth across. And my assistant couldn't reach to the middle with a roller to give sufficient pressure to the block, and so she stomped it with her feet, which gave me the idea that this is a very good way of printing. And in fact, me having the beginnings of arthritis, it's saved my bacon. So that's what I do. I make wallpaper. I am not only a wallpaper maker, I still do portraits. In fact, in a couple of weeks' time, we've got an initiative here in Bridport called the Portrait Challenge, which is to encourage people to put beside their rainbows in their windows portraits of all the people in the house, drawn by each other, drawn by kids, whoever it is. And to promote this, I'm going with half a dozen other artists who I've recruited to draw 15-minute portraits in the square of people in return for them doing a drawing of one of the people that they're with. So it's to encourage drawing. I'm always drawing. This is one of my sketchbooks. There are drawings here. Oh, I don't know if you can see this. There are drawings here. There are more drawings. I draw in sepia ink, and these are really for paintings. This one turned into a lino cut, actually. It's the hill just behind the house. Well, it's actually the second hill behind the house, and it's a village called Symonsbury, which is in walking distance. I'm doing a lot of paintings of woodland and hollowways at the moment, and I'm really enjoying that. I was able to get out into the woods during lockdown because nobody was out in the woods, and we have access to the woods just behind our house. But I wanted to talk about my relationship with Wales, which is quite interesting. Apart from being a wallpaper painter, a wallpaper maker, and a painter, an artist, I'm also the father of 4 boys and a girl. My father died when I was 19, and so he was rather a distant figure because he was sent home from the colonies when he was age 2, can you believe it, with his brother. Anyway, so he was quite a remote figure. And when my eldest boy, Jesse, became 8, I realized he was emotionally leaving me, and I couldn't quite understand why. And that was the age that I was sent away to school at. So I was very lucky to find at exactly the same time an announcement for a men's conference. This was in 1985 or so, 1986. A man called Robert Bly, an American poet, who was really the grandfather of the men's movement, the men's emotional awareness movement. It's a bit difficult to describe if people don't quite know what I'm talking about, but I went to this conference with great trepidation because I'm used to having women around, and I had not been in just the company of 120 men since I was at school. But at one point he said, "Put up your hands, anyone who's part of a men's group." Nobody put up a hand. There weren't such things in England. So at lunchtime I went and said, "Robert, what's a men's group? How do you form a men's group?" And he explained to me that you get half a dozen people, men, preferably of different ages, preferably of different backgrounds, and you meet together on a regular basis, perhaps every 2 weeks, perhaps once a month, and you see what happens. You don't have to have a facilitator. You take it in turns. If you take it in turns whose house it goes to, they also, they may initiate the conversation. Well, I broke up my first 3 or 4 men's groups because I was wanting to go too fast. I also refused to take people who were recommended by their wives sometimes people were, you know, I got a telephone call from Jackie, and Jackie would say, my Bill would love this, it would do him so much good, will you have him? And I said, no, he's got to approach me himself. Anyway, in the end, I had a men's group that lasted for 10 years. And my father-in-law had a house at a place called Llanfa outside Bala. And we initially went there for a weekend, the men together, and we found it such a liberating experience. We went regularly, and I started running retreats there, which were called vision quests. They weren't really vision quests, but they were retreats for men. They'd arrive on a Thursday. We'd introduce each other and ourselves over an evening meal. There were 2 facilitators. I did this with a psychotherapist from Oxford, and who was part of my men's group. And we took them out into this vast landscape above Bala and dropped them off without telephones, without books, without any distraction. And they stayed there until the Monday night. There were streams there where they could take water to boil. Some of them took food. The younger and more ambitious of them fasted during the whole time, and we encouraged them to stay awake on the last night. I did this for 20 years until insurance made it absolutely impossible that we did so. But it was absolutely wonderful. I never did this, but I always wished that I'd taken photographs of people before they left and people when they came back. Because I tell you, a completely different lot of people came back. And I thought, Christ, have I ever seen you before? It was mind-boggling what happened to people. It was really beautiful. And that landscape taught me an awful lot about other men and having the courage to talk to other men. Initially, I thought I didn't know how to talk, how to relate to other men. And it wasn't that I didn't know how to relate to other men. I didn't know the language to talk to other men. And you really have to give permission by example. So if you want to talk deep, you can talk about money. If you want to talk deeper, you can talk about sex and your own inadequacies and your own experiences. And suddenly people sit up and they think, oh my gosh, is this what the level we're talking at? And it was wonderful. And I'm very pleased to say that 2 of my boys are continuing the same tradition of meeting with their men friends. And it's been a great help, certainly to one of them, in the breakup of his first marriage. Have I talked enough, or shall I carry on? I've got other things I can talk about.
I'm coming here. I'm coming. Hello. Hugh, well, I'm very happy. I'll sit here and listen to you talking on. Yeah, I can see some nodding faces, Hugh. I'm looking at everyone on the screen together. You've been about, it's just gone 5 past. If anyone wants to jump in and ask questions, they're welcome. But if you want to take another 5 or 10 minutes, I'm quite happy. It's fascinating. You're definitely preaching to the converted with the idea of a men's group.
Okay.
It's fascinating what you're saying. Is everyone happy? Should we carry on for a bit?
Yes. Okay, we'll carry on. Well, I believe Robert's still alive. I haven't seen him for several years, and I have a sort of love-hate relationship. I think he's a wonderful man, and he was extremely kind to one of my sons, who I took at the age of 16 to Gaunt's house, to one of these things where he was talking with Michael Mead and Malidoma Some. And Rollo, my son, was by far the youngest, and Robert really took him under his wing. But I have also seen Robert put men down in a really cruel way, which, you know, maybe people need a rap on the knuckles. Something I wanted to point out, which is to do with this idea of mentorship. And through a whole series of circumstances, my first son, Jesse, was born in Brazil. My wife was English, but we decided to emigrate rather than be young and married and living in Oxford and going to Habitat and what have you. And anyway, through the whole, I could tell you that story, but that's a red herring. So when he was 14, he was at Shipping Norton Comprehensive School. Now the extraordinary thing about the English countryside is that we lived near a village called Great Rollright, and Great Rollright had no manor house. What's the relevance of that? Is that in the 18th and 19th century, when people misbehaved in the villages, they were thrown out of their tithe cottages in the villages that had manor houses, and they ended up in Great Rollright. So Great Rollright seemed to have a rather failing population of people who just wanted to be tractor drivers. Nothing wrong with tractor drivers, but my son wanted to be a pediatrician. They wanted to work, his peers wanted to work in Wimpy's, or they didn't have much ambition. There was no way that my son was going to be a pediatrician. So I took him out of school, and being a Quaker, I asked where another Quaker where he should go, and he eventually went to a Quaker school in Reading. But in the meantime, I thought I'd shake up his base by taking him back to Brazil. This was before the age of the internet, and so we were losing touch with all our friends in Brazil. And I took 6 weeks off, and we went back to Brazil, and he was in charge of the money. Now, my son Jess is a very lucky man. He's still lucky. He spent the night of his 14th birthday in the bed he was born in, by chance, in a house in a town called Ouro Preto in Minas Gerais. And the next day we went to change some money, unaware that they devalued the currency overnight. And rather than coming away with a little pile of money like that, we had a wad like this, and we were suddenly millionaires, and we thought, where the hell can we go? And so we went traveling around Brazil. When we came home, the next son down, who was 2 years younger, aged 12 at the time, said, where are you going to take me when I'm 14? So this became a family tradition, and I would recommend it to people. The reason that it became a tradition is that having 5 children of ages from 42 down to 30, is that when they're young, you try and do things as a family. What you do doesn't satisfy the eldest because it's too childish, and it's too grown up for the youngest. And so it was really difficult to satisfy them all. And it was really only in having car journeys alone that we had quiet time with them. So to take them off for 6 weeks was a most wonderful, it was a gift of God. I couldn't have invented this thing. It was just a chance opportunity. And it made us reliant on each other in a way that couldn't have been engineered. I mean, in the first journey, we stayed in the Mato Grosso with a tribe called the Xingu, and in the Pantanal, on the edge of the Pantanal. And as a joke, one of the kids there of the tribe decided to loosen my hammock strings, and I fell 9 foot onto a hard earth floor, and I thought I'd broken my coccyx. I was in such agony, and I was speechless for 2 days. There wasn't a doctor for 500 miles. My son Jesse, just age 14, had to negotiate with these people and look after me at the same time. My second son, we bicycled from Oxfordshire down to Santiago de Compostela, which is a journey of just about 1,600 miles. And we did this around Easter time because his birthday is in May, early May. And we thought we were doing really well until we hit snowdrifts inland from Bordeaux. And we both became very ill. He, being young, managed to shake his flu off. And mine didn't really kick in until we were crossing the Pyrenees and I started hallucinating. And he again had to go and find a doctor and find someone to look after me. And we sought refuge in a monastery. And I dosed myself with homeopathic remedies. And luckily we came to, because it had been raining most of the way down through France. It's a very wonderful thing to do. I've got young friends, friends of my boys, who are keen to do the same thing when their sons become of that age. I think it's an important thing to do, to also to show your vulnerability to your kids. They probably see it anyway at home, but certainly when it's just the two of you, you get thrown together in a way that is not possible at home for some time. How are we? We're 1:15 almost.
I'm coming. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, Hugh. That's it's fascinating. And actually, you touched on a lot of things. My gosh, you moved us from wallpapering to away breaks with teenagers and
Yes.
And actually, also men's groups away in the woods, and that's something that we've discussed a couple of times. Is I love the idea of taking a group of blokes out and removing our phones and doing a bit of campfire and sausages and boiling water and all that stuff. Has anybody got any questions for Hugh or any comments they want to make? Because we can unmute you quite easily, and you can ask questions, make comments on Wallpaper, to men's groups, to adventure breaks away. I warned you, Hugh, they'd probably sit there in silence. Anybody waving? Simon's got something to say.
Go for it, Simon.
No, I'm just going to say I've actually got Robert Bly's book here next to me as you've been speaking. Yeah, really interesting stuff, really relevant to sort of the bigger picture of what we've been doing. So yeah, I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I did most of my emotional growing up through women, through girlfriends, through my mother, and it sort of became, I became aware of this and thought, what the hell's the matter with men? And there was nothing the matter with men. It was that I didn't have a language to speak to men in. And it was really through Robert that I realized that actually, you know, a man is half of humanity. And so if you can only speak half a language, you can't get very far. And in fact, it's much richer. I think I will choose that word, to speak to men as brothers, because I have a habit, this I must own, of treating a woman as a confessor and more of a mother than it's not entirely so, but you know what I'm getting at. Mm-hmm. Without women there is no competition, or a lot less competition between men. Yeah. And that was really interesting. I once did the most extraordinary thing. I used to go on dance camps, and before health and safety and all that sort of stuff, which has its relevance, we decided to talk about sex to the children. So two of us, there was a woman who was she was the bursar of a famous girls' school, and me, and I mean, we were close to being hippies, and the children we'd known for many years, because we went always to the same dance camp, so literally for year after year. So there was an understanding of safety, which probably wouldn't have passed any test. But anyway, we did this thing where I got the boys to come and I told them about sex. And I'm afraid I told them about sex because they didn't want to ask any questions. and then, so I told them about the good sides and the bad sides and my experience and so on. Then I went to talk to all the girls about sex, and the woman, I've forgotten her name immediately now, went to talk to the boys. The girls had lots of questions for me. Then we went back and talked to the boys again, surrounded by the girls who didn't ask any questions, but just witnessed the fact that the boys didn't ask. Then we did the opposite, where my colleague talked to the girls and the girls asked lots of questions and the boys were sitting there open-mouthed. And it was beautiful. It was really beautiful. I mean, the questions they asked, I can't remember now, but I wish I'd recorded the thing. But I was scratching my head thinking, how can we elegantly wrap this up? It took sort of, you know, half an hour each. And then, so the whole thing was over about 2 or 3 hours. So I thought in the end, what we can do, we can get the girls on one side of these were all taking part in big tents. The girls on one side and the boys on the other side, and they can say what they admire about the opposite sex. And it was wonderful because the two things I remember, the boys were saying, girls, you're so lucky that it doesn't show when you're excited by seeing a girl. And the girls were saying to the boys, well, you're so lucky that you can pee standing up.
It's true enough.
So we have our benefits, both of us. But it was a very, very beautiful moment.
There we are.
I don't know.
You've taken this in another direction I wasn't expecting you. Come on, more questions. Anybody got anything to say? We're getting quite close to it, really. 20 past.
Yeah, can I ask a question? I was just wondering, what are Hugh's views on the men's sheds movement?
Yeah.
Well, do you know, I don't know so much about the men's shed movement, but I've got a close friend here in Dorset who apparently organises it in Bridport, but it's all rather broken down because they haven't got a place to meet at the moment. But I think anything like that is really, really important. I've done a certain amount, since I was a student, I've done a certain amount of teaching in prisons. They've always been men's prisons, except for once when I went, the last time I went, which was about 6 years ago, was a women's prison just outside Heathrow. You know, there's something like 87,000 prisoners, of which 6,000 are women, which is extraordinary. So under the guise of teaching design, I have always taught something about male responsibility, because most people are there because they haven't had a proper adult responsible relationship with another man, and they have been badly fathered, if fathered at all. And I think it's our responsibility, certainly my responsibility, to help men who find themselves in that situation still, to put my arm around them and say, there are ways of doing this. Go and look for a mentor, go and look for someone who you can be steered by. And I believe very much in doing this with fatherless boys, of which there are masses around, who are either brought up by single mothers who've never had a partner, or by single mothers whose partners are not around. And they're boys who are desperate for male it's not even leadership. It's just a male voice. It's just a male hand on their shoulder. Look, you too can be an artist. If I, son of an army officer, could become an artist. I didn't know anyone who worked for themselves when I was a kid. We knew soldiers, we knew doctors, because my mum came from a medical family. So I'm really keen to pass those sort of things on to kids. And I think the men's shed movement, if it brings men together, it's a really important thing. It also happens at the other end of life, when people have been identified very much by their work and they retire, and suddenly they are without identity. And what do? Do they go and play golf? Do they go down to the pub every night? I think it's a very wasteful time in many people's lives when they've got the experience that they can pass on to younger people, especially at the moment when young people are going to be foundering and out of work. And an older man's influence can be invaluable to a younger person. And, you know, looking at your faces, some of you are younger, some of you are not, but you're all up to it. And I'd recommend you think of someone you could do that. The other day, I did a portrait of a boy who I much admire. He's only 7, but he sat for an hour. Well, he sat for an hour to do a drawing, and then I thought, this is going somewhere. So I did a painting of him. I always sit with a mirror behind me, so it grabs their attention. But I just wanted to, what's the word? It's sort of like sponsor him. I just wanted to say, I recognize you, because my other great mentor in my life was a film director called David Lean. He was the guy who made Doc Zhivago and Lawrence of Arabia and Bridge on the River Kwai and so on. And he recognized me when I was 23. I knew him through an old girlfriend who was his niece, and he took me out to Tahiti. He, as it were, sponsored me. He was the first grown-up man who said, you're all right. You know, my dad had been dead for a while. I didn't know men.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, again, I think you're absolutely, we all have experience, you said quite a while ago, you know, you wonder what is wrong with men. And I think we can all say we've had the experience of realizing actually there's nothing wrong with men. It is one of the things about the men's shed movement. When we actually get together and we're doing something practical, I've been amazed in this role of quite how emotionally available men are. And there's a story that gets told about men not being able to express themselves, not being able to share their feelings, talk about deeper, difficult issues. Actually, my experience is that that's not the case at all. If the environment is right and the permission is given, we're right there. And I think you're absolutely right. That we all have a role to play in that, because it's critical. And it is important also that we do reach out to younger men as well.
Absolutely.
You know?
I was married for 24 years, and then I was asked to leave because it was just too much. My life was too much. And I found myself more or less on the streets of London. I mean, it wasn't the streets of London because I have men friends, and my men friends looked after me. And I was really out on a limb for 2-3 years, something like that. And although there were women there, they wanted to save me. I didn't want saving, I wanted friendship. There are lots of women who want to, you know, there are lots of men who want to save women. It's not the prerogative of women. But actually, the thing that helped me most of all, apart from my men friends, I was recommended, because coming from a large family, suddenly living by myself in London, someone said, why don't you go and work for a homeless place? So there was this place called the Passage in Victoria, and I wanted to draw some of the homeless people because they were absolutely fascinating, their faces. And the only way I could do that was by going to give out meals to people. And then I started drawing them after the meals. and they sent the drawings home to their mothers or their daughters or whoever, and we became friends, and it was absolutely extraordinary. And they gave me much more than I gave them. I remember bicycling home thinking, wow, that's so wonderful. I feel useful again.
Yeah, marvellous. It's great stuff. Hugh, I'm going to have to wind it up, I think. And I'm going to have an attempt. We've got a little poll here that I like to try and run at the end of the session, just to see that, you know, people are still enjoying themselves. I'm going to try it again. It is somewhat technically challenging for me, not for you lot, hopefully. I'm not going to share the results, so don't worry. If everybody has hated the session, I'm not going to put it up and show a graph. But I'm afraid, similarly, if everybody's loved it, I'll have to tell you privately at another time, okay? It's just a disclaimer I've got to say, you know. I'm going to have a bash. Okay, so here's the polling. You should see it on your screen, everyone. And I think you just click the boxes to see whether you've enjoyed yourselves or not.
Do I do this as well?
Yeah, go on. If you've
Why not? Yes.
No, if you've enjoyed yourself.
Oh, hang on. I'm on a different sort of thing. Okay.
I did have one question.
Oh yeah, good. Go for it.
Which is just about the designs. Are all the designs sort of just single colour on another colour?
Yes, they are. And the reason for that, yes, I should have explained that. The reason for that is that you can then register them by eye. In other words, when you, where's the block? When I pick up this block and I put it down, I literally just do it by eye. If you have a second colour on top, it's got to be done in exactly the right place. Otherwise, it becomes, do you remember those old comics where the colour registration was out and it looked as though you had funny glasses on? Well, so I use just two colours. That's the basic reason. But the other reason is you can, you don't make too complicated patterns. They are not, they're more restful for the eye if they're two colours, and especially if you have them close in tone. I've got one here, but oh, I was going to talk about other things as well. Never mind. There's one here that is gold on red, and I mean, if that had another colour in it, it just doesn't need it actually.
Yeah.
I mean, they're meant to be. Wallpaper is a background. It's a, you know, it's no coincidence you talk about wallpaper on a computer, you know, as being all, you know, I felt like wallpaper in the party. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is only background stuff.
Background music, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've quite forgotten we started talking about wallpaper. I was going to ask you what wallpaper you use. I mean, are you actually printing on sort of blank lining wallpaper?
Yeah, lining paper with emulsion.
Yeah.
The easiest bloody thing, I tell you.
Yeah.
When I teach this course, I was asked to do a course by some. No, I wasn't. I was when I first went to Lyme Regis, there was a magazine called Selvage who did an article on me, and I said in that I was training up the school kids to come and print for me, to be my slaves during the winter when they couldn't go and sell ice creams. And 23 people wrote into the editor, said, can we come and learn to be slaves of Hugh Dunford-Wood? And so she arranged this competition where people would, as a prize, get a place on a wallpaper course. And I'd never done a wallpaper course. I thought, bloody hell, how'd you do that? And I worked it out, and I still do more or less the same thing these days. Friday night to Sunday afternoon, and we make wallpaper, and you end up with your own design, and you can go and, you know, set up your own William Morris business after that.
Well, when that time comes, Hugh, I can see that we might well be booking you for that workshop. I think there might be some people interested in that. I must admit, I quite fancy putting my hand up myself. I did notice that you moved from talking about menteeship and apprenticeship to slavehood. Quite. we won't draw attention to that. I got one last question to ask, and it's just about how people got into the Zoom room today, because you will have noticed you didn't have to pre-register for this one. I'm just going to pop that up there. Just again, this is just to keep me, you know, functioning professionally. Not an easy task. Can you see that? I guess you all got here, so I guess we're doing pretty well. That's great. Look at that. It's been absolutely fascinating. I've really enjoyed today's session. In fact, I really enjoy them every time we run a session, but it's been great, and it's really covered quite a lot of distance this week. We've talked about some new areas to think about as well, which is really useful. So thank you very, very much for your time. I think we've all got a little waving hand icon or something if we want to show our thumbs up or our appreciation, whatever, you know. we can do that. We're just showing off. Thank
Great.
you for your time.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks.
I remind you all again that Roger will be with us in a fortnight's time, but you will be bombarded with emails and Facebook messages about that closer to the time when we learn all about penny farthings. Hugh, you'd be more than welcome to join us as a participant in that if you were available on a Friday afternoon. Apart from that, I'm going to wish you all have a good weekend and let you all out of the room.
And can I just say before I go, if anyone wants to get in touch and ask me any questions further, I'm very happy to talk further. There we are.
Great.
If you're in Britain, see me.
Yeah, we'll distribute your email address. I would recommend people have a look at it at your website and things. That would be great.
Okay.
Wow.
Very good.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Good.
I love it when they all leave bit by bit. Look at that. Yeah. Good. I think that's done. We're all done.
Who's
Epic.
Martin and David?
Yeah, we're watching you.
Who's left? Who's left? Bloody hell, that was fascinating. That was quite something.
We should have him again.
Yeah.
You did that, did you?
He gets, well, yeah, he touches onto the side that I've always been fascinated by. I mean, you know, it's that bit which is what they're doing when they're not making bird boxes and when they sit